Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to have a lot of fun around something that seems boring, but actually it's not. And it's the whole construction process and what's going wrong with it and how it can help make things better and more efficient. I'm lucky enough to have Todd Zabelle with me on the mic. How you doing today, Todd?
Excellent. How you doing, Mark?
It's cold here in Houston, Texas. It's 53 degrees. We're not built to handle anything below 80. But other than that, I'm going well. Thank you. So, you wrote this book, Built to Fail. You sent me a copy of it. Thank you. I read through it. And what you probably don't know is a million years ago, I actually used to build cell sites. I was a project manager. And some of the stuff you talked about here was amazing because it brought back memories. And I want to kind of start with the current culture of construction in the U.S., and then we're going to move to your book. So if I would say, what is the state of the culture of construction in the U.S. right now, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say that to me, we look at this from what we might call the three eras perspective. We are operating on technology that was developed, let's say, in the 1910s and later in the early 1960s, and we're still very, very committed to that. We're committed to that for two reasons. One, because that's how we make money, and two, because that's what we truly understand. So the whole culture aspect of it is dedicated to stuff that may or may not produce the results or clearly doesn't produce the results we want, but yet we're very, very committed to it. And it's the most amazing thing that's going on right now, that people believe for some reason that it's going to be all right. So they're very optimistic no matter how much carnage they have experienced. And let me just hit with one last thing. Everybody thinks the next project's going to be the one where we get it and get it right, but we're not going to do anything different.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So in a nutshell, why do construction projects tend to run over budget and over time?
That's an excellent question. And it's not difficult to answer if you step back. So I referenced a little bit about this idea of three eras. Frederick Taylor in the turn of the last century was very, very instrumental in how to think about managing work. And basically his idea was, if we have everyone work as hard as we can, we will get things done in a faster fashion than if we didn't. And that's fundamentally flawed. Those ideas were actually ported over to the construction industry by a guy named Daniel Howard. The construction industry went on that specific path. Manufacturing, based on Ford and his flow of production, later Toyota, and we know what happened in manufacturing, took a totally different route. It wasn't about workers working harder, it was about getting more through the process. So in about the 1960s, the Department of Defense in the U.S. needed to become more predictable for congressional appropriations of capital budgeting, right? And so they put this whole layer of administration in there. So at the end of the day, what we have is a deep commitment to spending more time on administrating and trying to predict what's going to happen than we do actually what I would call managing the work, whether you're designing, engineering, making things, or installing them. Okay.
Yeah, I have never heard somebody tie in manufacturing and construction, but now that I think about it, you're absolutely right. They took two different paths. One is much more efficient, amazingly efficient, actually, especially if you look at like automotive, and the other one is still kind of stuck in the past. Now, one of the things I read in your book that I loved, you talk about the separation of planning and doing. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and let's go back just a little bit further. So originally in the 1800s, right, Charles Babbage, he separates into disciplines and trades. And his studies of what at that time during the Industrial Revolution was manufacturing is, we shouldn't have any of the higher skilled workers doing non-skilled work. So that's your first separation. But really when this starts to occur is Taylor's the guy that says, look, the workers are idiots. And he basically says that in the book. He uses a guy named Schmidt, says this guy's the stupidest guy in the works. Let's figure out how if we could fix him, we could fix anybody. So he puts these 8 foremen on top of the shop and splits out this idea of there's the doers and then there's the managers. And that, coupled with some other things that happened then, had built this whole hierarchy of what we call this administration. And it's just become an albatross across the neck of around the neck of people that are involved in these capital projects.
Yeah, and so one of the other things I love that you talked about here is that how the culture of project managers hasn't changed because it's the way they've always done it before. And this is exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
We had one of the most incredible experiences with a project director on an extremely large project that you would know the name of if I mentioned it. And I guarantee you, these are listeners of your podcast. And by the way, congratulations on the award. But to come back to this, we took a fundamental mathematical equation developed by Little that talks about the relationship between throughput through a process and how much inventory or WIP you have going on the rest. It's been proven, or mathematicians have attempted to disprove it. Mathematicians at places like UC Berkeley and the rest. And so this thing's proven in the 70s, right? We put it up on the board and said one of the key things we need to look at is how the relationship between how much work we have going on, how much work we're getting complete. He looked at it and said, I don't think that equation's accurate. Okay, this is an equation that came out of a guy from MIT, has been validated by people at places like UC Berkeley, and a project director, right, probably didn't even have a civil engineering background, said, I don't believe the math. That's really where we are.
Yeah. So when you look at where we are now, and after going through your book, your suggestions to me are based on a lot of things that, number one, I would call common sense. Number two, you're bringing in modern technology. And when I say modern technology, some of the project management tools that we use in this industry, and they're wonderful, by the way, but they haven't changed since I've been around at all. So can you talk a little bit about that technology element when you're talking about things like lean construction?
Yeah. So basically, we could probably put these things into maybe three buckets, right? We got how we think about stuff. It's fundamentally flawed and is the core. So there's a technological thing where I guess what I've been alluding to is we overemphasize administration over managing the work, number one. Number two, we have technology in the way of methodology. Our methodologies really haven't changed since Frederick Taylor, okay? Now, technology, and I happen to be in the software business for 20-something years now by default, if you will. Software enables a process. So the methodology is core. What are we actually automating, right? And so we've now built softwares to automate stuff we probably shouldn't be doing, right?
Agreed.
And so at all layers, this thing, and then I lay on another layer, it's not really technology, but academia is teaching the same stuff. So nothing's really changed. I'm going to give you an interesting statistic. We did some research. A guy named Paul Teicholz down at Stanford, the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, figured out from 1964 to 2012 what it was. There's no gains in productivity in construction. We went back and found some statistics from the U.S. Bureau of Statistics. There's been no gain in productivity since 1910 when the Taylorism took hold. Now, here's a real thing that people haven't thought about. We can't even adopt new technology because we're not looking at the production perspective. So things like IoT sensors, right, to a certain extent, machine learning, AI, right, autonomous vehicles, robotics. If your idea is to be heavily focused on the administrative aspects of a project and not the actual work, you don't need any of that stuff, right? You're not thinking about that stuff. So it's across the board where it's all interconnected.
Yeah. So, Todd, I'd like to, real quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time here, what was the impetus for you writing this book?
Well, you can probably tell my hair is a little grayer than it was before. I turned 60 last week, and I sat back and I said, I was one of the early adopters in 3 and 4D modeling. I was one of the owners of Lean Construction Institute. We founded the Project Production Institute. I watched all this carnage going on. I have relationships in academia and relationships in industry, worked across the board and all sorts of different things related to projects. I said, enough's enough. Somebody's got to at least start the conversation, right? So there's things in the book that I know are debatable and highly antagonistic to existing ways of thinking and doing things. But I think somebody had to step forward. And I just happen to be fortunate enough to have enough of a journey in my life to have the right relationships that hopefully I could be the lightning rod to get this thing moving forward. Because one thing that a lot of people aren't really paying attention to, and I'll just give you some statistics. I don't know if anyone's compiled this, but I know that I did for a talk in Monaco last year. We have to build a Paris every week or a New York City every month. We have to spend, they thought, the $5 trillion per annum on energy transition. That figure is now, based on COP28 McKinsey, $9 trillion per annum because we're behind program, right? And then we have this whole thing with the digital transformation. All of that is sharing the same labor pool and the same supply base amongst the OEMs. And we've got to do all the mining to enable that, which is a whole nother set of projects that people are now starting to realize. So what really was the impetus is there's a huge demand coming at the engineering and construction industry. There's no doubt it's broken. People are frustrated, but it's how they make money and what they've been taught. And I just thought that maybe this would be the opportunity to take what I've done in my past, the experiences I've had, and the relationships I have to become the lightning rod. And I'll probably get fried, in the whole process. But at this point, who cares?
No, I don't think you're going to get fried. I do think you're going to get some pushback from some of the old school stuff. But people, I'm telling you, read the book. If you're in anything to do with construction whatsoever, if you manage construction projects, even if you're on the accounting side of construction projects and oil and gas, pick this book up. It's easy to read. It's full of really good information. And Todd, it's actually very well written. It was not dry at all. You have some humorous parts in there. So if people wanted to learn more about this book and actually pick up a copy or maybe a dozen copies for their company or 100 copies, where should they go?
Yeah, I think they should visit b2fbook.com. And in addition to the book, there's going to be some higher resolution graphics because people are looking for that. And there's even more stories there.
Yeah. And folks, we'll put a link in the show notes. So the first link in the show notes will be a link to go pick up this book. Like I said, wonderful read, easy, very informative, very useful. Todd, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for sending me a copy of this. This is really, really, it was unexpected, but it was a really, really good read.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. It was great having you on the show. I wish you much success.
Thank you very much. Look forward to talking again. Cheers.